our bases here. But no, welcome very much. And I'll go ahead with the program now. Got my screen's turned around so I can't see my PowerPoint. Okay, so this program today is on the basics of canning food at home. And I want to welcome you, I guess, Kathy, and then there should be others joining us. There's a couple more coming on now. So the whole intent of these is just to get information out to you. And when we're on this program, and I would ask that you mute your mic on your Zoom. You know, be real, be you, be authentic. You're welcome to ask any questions or to chime in on the chat feature, which I will outline if you're new to Zoom and not comfortable with those kind of things. But there again, be very candid with your points and ask any questions, because if you have a question, someone else on the program probably has a similar question as well. Okay, so if you're on a phone especially, or even on an iPad, you have down at the lower bottom there, if you see that left picture says more, if you click on there, you will come up with the chat feature, and that's where you can type in any of the chats. And the thing to notice, like in the third picture over on that chat screen, is it tells who you're sending it to, and you can send it to the whole group or you can send them to me directly, and I'm going to try to manage those as we go along this program. And so if we get to a point where you've asked a question and I haven't answered it, I will for sure check those before we log off at the end of the program today, just to kind of let you know how that all works. Okay, there again, your mute function should be on your Zoom bar there, either at the top of your screen or at the bottom of your screen and over to the left-hand side, and you just merely click on that little audio microphone and it will mute you, especially if you get background or have somebody come in and out or the dog is barking or something like that, which sounds realistic to my life. So just to let you know those kind of features. And there again, I'm recording this today so I can send out this recording to you. That wasn't my feature or wasn't my thought ahead of time, but I am going to go ahead and record it for you. So there again, I want to introduce myself. My name is Brenda Oftenkamp, and I'm a food nutrition and health educator with Nebraska Extension. I'm located in North Platte, and I serve a 10-county accountability region. And you'll see my phone number there on the screen as well as my email. So feel like you can contact me either way or through the chat as long as we're on this program today. Okay, so today the five main points of this program is to understand the steps to safely home can, understand the two canning methods that can be utilized, start developing a checklist of equipment needs, and this one is really a basic program. So if you're completely new to canning, you might want to have a pencil and a piece of paper to check, to write down the things that we talk about, those equipment needs, and then we're going to explore the research-based resources and what I mean by that. And then we're going to learn how to get your pressure gauge tested if you have one of those, which is really a requirement by USDA, and Nebraska Extension really impresses upon people to have their canner gauge tested. So the first thing is to always follow steps. You want to select high quality foods. You want to pack the jars, and you want to follow USDA home canning instructions. And you want to use a two-piece lid is what we call it. And there are new type lids out there that are reusable, that are two-piece, but that means it has that ring that you screw on plus the flat. And then we're going to talk about storing of products properly after we've done our home canning. So those will all be talked about today. The first two supplies is that you need a canner, and whether you're going to do the boiling water bath method or whether you're going to pressure can, you need one or the other. And the picture that you see on this screen is a picture of a boiling water bath canner, and it's really just a big pot that has that rack that you see there that you can set your jars down into. It doesn't have to be a special pot, really, just a heavy pot that can handle boiling at high temperatures for a length of time. And then over here on the left-hand side, that little green thing is a jar funnel. And there again, it's not mandatory, but jar funnels really allow you to get your produce and into the jars for home canning in a very safe and easy manner when you have hot things. Plus, it also saves a big mess. The third supply that I recommend is a jar lifter. And this really is just a little plastic stick that has a magnet on it so you could lift those up and so forth. But it's not necessarily required, but just another nice supply that they do have out there. The fourth one is the bubble freer and headspace tool. So there again, a bubble freer we'll talk about more going on down when we do pressure canning here in several weeks. But that's a bubble freer really is any plastic or wooden type thing that you could run down the side of the jar after you fill your produce to pop any air bubbles that are in there so that you get nice compaction and not a lot of floating produce. And this little tool here to the left is what you could use to free those bubbles, as well as it's a headspace tool, and that's what you see it doing. They have little stair steps on there that mark 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, and you put it down in so that you can guarantee that you have the required headspace, from the top of your produce to the top of the jar that will be specified in your reliable recipe that you're using. The fifth one is a jar lifter, and I would tell you this is really more of a mandatory one. You want a safe jar lifter, something that you can lift the jars into the canner when you have hot water in the canner already, as well as at the completion of the canning process. You want to be able to lift the jars out safely. And this is a jar lifter that would allow you to do that. Okay, the other one is jars, and there again, the jars are going to be determined, the size of jar is going to be determined by the canning recipe that you're using, but usually you're talking jelly jars or you're talking pint jars or quart jars for all research-based recipes. And then you have those lids and bands, and we'll see those in a little bit, but that's a two-piece lid that has the band, the screw band, as well as a flat that you utilize when you go to can and put all your produce in there. So that's the basic equipment that really would be necessary. And I kind of highlighted what's really required. And then there again, there's two methods for packing jars. And this doesn't matter whether you're using the boiling water method or whether you're pressure canning. You want to choose which method is best. And so these are the steps and the points on raw packing method. This is used for foods that are loose in shape when cooked. You place the raw food directly in the jar. So there again, there's no cooking. I've washed and sanitized my jars. I've washed my produce, and then I start just packing my jars in there. And then after you've done that with the raw produce is when you pour boiling hot water over the food. And there again, depending on what you're canning, you might use chicken broth, you might use beef broth, you might use vegetable broth, whatever, or just hot boiling water. And you pack them very firmly when you use the raw packing method. You don't want to crush things, but you want it as tight as possible. And then that's when you put the flat and the ring on that two-piece lid, and you would add it to the canner. But that is called the raw packing method, and you'll see this when we go on to a recipe here in a little bit. The other method is hot packing your produce. And so then this is really the preferred method for many foods. Food is cooked in liquid prior to packing into your jars. And so you would pack it, or you would cook it and bring it to a boil, and you'd simmer for a length of time. And then you would have another pan that would have cooking liquid that you'd use to pour over the jars of that hot food once you've packed it into the jars. The hot packing method of canning really requires fewer jars are needed. Your produce is not going to be as likely to float in a finished canned product. And then also hot packing really retains the color of the produce as well as the flavor when you use the hot packing method. And then using the hot packing method is much easier because the foods have been cooked and they're more pliable. And so you take less jars because the food can be crunched up and less air spaces. Okay, then what do we mean when we talk about headspace? I think my bar is in your way. I've been trying to move it here. Oh, I have somebody else waiting. Very good. I think you're just coming on. I just admitted you. Sorry. We've just went through the basics of supplies and so forth. I am taping this, so I will see that you get this emailed back out to you. But we're on to the slide talking about headspace. So what is meant by headspace? And there again, you see that jar to the right that talks about, or that shows you the picture. But headspace is the space between the top of your product and the top of that jar. And it could be liquid or it could be produce. And following guidelines, you want to always make sure that you're using the correct headspace. Okay, and for gelled products, it's usually 1/4 of an inch. For fruits, tomatoes, and pickles, it's 1/2 inch. And then when you go to your low acid foods, which would be when you're pressure canning, it really would be specified on the recipe, but it's at least 1 inch to 1.25 inch headspace. So make sure you understand what this headspace is, and that's why they do make a special tool that you can stick down in the top of your jar that helps you identify what headspace you're at. But those rims on the jar somewhat determine that, and that's what you can use as a gauge as well. So what if you have too little a headspace and you go ahead and close up the jars with that two-piece lid and process them? What you would find is that food may bubble out during the processing if you haven't left enough headspace, and you maybe would get food deposits around the rim of your jar, and then this would prevent a proper seal, so you wouldn't come up with end up with a safe product to put on the shelf for the next 12 months in canning. And so that's a big reason why you don't want to have too little a headspace. But what happens if you have too much headspace? Food at the top is likely to discolor. Jars may not seal properly because the air is not being forced out of the jar. And so making sure that you have the correct headspace specified in your recipe in the jars that you're packing and then going to put that two-piece lid on and process is really, really important. And the big kicker is it really assures that you have a safe sealed product at the end of processing. Preparing your jars and lids. And there again, in that picture up there in the corner, you can see the jars, but then you see the piece lid and it's all together. That little red rim around there is the jar flat. And then the ring that screws it on is that outer part of it. But there again, you want to wash all your canning jars, dispose of any jars that has nicks and broken jars. You might want to run your finger around the rim of those jars as you're washing them just to make sure that there's no nicks in there. And then always prepare that two-piece canning lid and ring bands by following the package instructions. And this is it's not new at all, but one of the most missteps in food preservation from the calls that I receive is you no longer boil those two-piece lids prior to placing them on the jar. You want to just wash them in hot soapy water, leave them sit there, and be ready to put onto your jars once you've filled them with your produce. And there again, you want to remove those air bubbles. And when we do this, you want to rub in a plastic or a wooden spoon around the edge of the inside of the jar after you've put your produce in there. Don't use a metal knife or something to run down there to remove the air bubbles, because with the hot jars and the hot produce, you might crack a jar. So always use a plastic or a wooden spoon or a wooden, something. And then wipe down the rims of the jar with a wet, clean cloth. And we really would recommend that you use a damp single-use paper towel for this, and that you wipe off the top of the rims prior to putting on that two-piece lid. And then you put the flat on and the ring on and you tighten it. And when you tighten jars prior to processing, you're only tightening them to finger tight. Don't use muscles, just finger tight. That should hold them on there and allow the processing process to go on and have a good tight lid and seal when you're on there. Okay. The next one is talking about what canning method to use. So we have the acid foods and we have the low acid foods. And this is what you really need to identify what type of food you plan on home food preserving, and know that you have a different method for acid foods as low acid foods, which I'm going to explain here next. So if you're doing acidic foods, those are foods that have a pH. So if you think back to science class, on that pH scale, it has to have a pH of 4.6 or lower. So this would be all of your fruits, including tomatoes and pickles. And there again, we say pickles. The cucumber itself is not high in acidity, but it is, you have the vinegar added to it. So any pickling products. Okay, acidic foods. Okay, then there's the two methods. So boiling water canning is for your high acid foods, and your pressure canning are for those that are low acid. Okay, and we'll go through this a little bit more here as I explain it some more. Welcome to you that are coming on. Be sure to chat in the box or write in a chat if you have questions. I'm checking that every so often. So the boiling water canning method is what's for acidic foods. And we've learned that this canner that you see there is just really a big pot of water with that boils that has a rack in the bottom to place our foods in. And then the pressure canner is one that has a gauge on it, and it either has a gauge or you have a weighted jiggle on there. And pressure canning is required for low acid foods or a mixture of foods. Like if I was going to make beef and carrots and potatoes, so like a beef stew type canned product, I would have to use a pressure canner to do this. And that's the real differences between boiling water canning and pressure canning. So our low acid foods would be vegetables, meats, poultry, any of your chicken, turkey, duck, any of those soups, or mixtures of acidic and low acid foods. So like spaghetti sauce. Tomatoes fall right on the pH scale in the middle. So you can really boiling water method can tomatoes, or you can pressure can tomatoes. So if you're making spaghetti sauce, but if you're combining, adding in meat to your spaghetti sauce, or you're adding in vegetables along with the tomatoes, you must pressure can those. And so be aware of that. The only way you can create a safe home canned product is to pressure can those. And the whole thing behind pressure canning is with low acid foods, they must be pressure canned. And the thing that we're trying to prevent is Clostridium botulinum, which is the foodborne illness that is really extensive. And it must be it's heat resistant to spores. So you want to do it under pressure. And then there again, that when you pressure can versus using the boiling water method, you are using higher levels or a higher temperature to do that. Okay. Regardless of the method, each food or whatever produce you're choosing to can has its own processing time. So you have to look up a research-based recipe to follow. You must follow the directions step by step, and you can only use that size of jar. And so the example of this is if you've known anybody that's home canned salsa. Salsa can only be home canned in pint jars because that's the only method that's been tested that assures safety in salsa that's canned at home. And the length of processing time differs from your altitude, which we'll talk about that a little bit. And there again, this slide, whoops, I went too fast. This slide talks about the state of Nebraska, but wherever you are, you need to know that you have to adjust for elevation whenever you're doing home food preservation. We know water boils at 212 degrees, and that's if you're at sea level. But for elevations above sea level, it's necessary to add additional time or additional pressure to the pressure canning for processing. So in Nebraska, if you're in the state of Nebraska, you know that we go from right at 500, almost 600 feet up to almost 5,000 feet in the north west part of the state. So there again, make sure you know how to check what your elevation is. You can go into a Google and just type in, what is my elevation? I'm in North Platte, Nebraska, so I know I sit at about 1,832 feet above sea level, which you need to know. And so there again, if I'm going to be doing some water bath canning, here is the chart that would come on a research-based recipe. And this table 1 that you're seeing here is for tomatillo green salsa in a boiling water canner. And the style of pack, I have to hot pack this. So that means all of my ingredients for tomatillo green salsa are going to go into a pot that I can bring to a boil and simmer. I can only use pint-sized jars, is what my recipe chart tells me. And then depending on what my elevation is here. So I'm at 1,832 feet. So if I was making this salsa today in North Platte, Nebraska, I would have to process for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Okay, and that's why you want to make sure if you have a recipe that doesn't break it down like this for different elevations or altitudes, you probably are not using a research-based reliable recipe. So here's one for a pressure canner. And there again, here, this is a dial gauge pressure canner recipe for pears. I always have to hot pack my pears, it says, and I can choose to use pints or quarts in this recipe. But I'm going to process for 10 minutes, a processing time. But my pressure canner, where I'm in North Platte, would have to go to 6 pounds of pressure. If I was in the mountains or higher up elevation at 2,000 to 4,000 feet, I'd have to go to 7 pounds of pressure and then start my timer for the 10 minutes of processing. So there again, research-based, reliable recipes will point this out to you. When you pressure can, and if you're using a gauge pressure canner, this gauge, like you see on the screen, USDA recommends that these are tested regularly, which means once every 12 months. And especially if it's fallen off the storage shelf or it's been jostled around, those type of things, make sure you reach out to someplace that can test them. Here in Nebraska, you see all the counties in red. Each one of those offices do have a pressure gauge calibrator. So before you go to any of those offices, I would call ahead of time, but you can take your pressure gauge in. I'm in Lincoln County. You can come in here to the office in North Platte, give me a call ahead of time to make sure I'm going to be there. And then I will test your pressure canner gauge against my calibration gauge that I get recalibrated annually to make sure that your gauge is reading correctly for the correct amount of pounds that you're going to be canning to. Okay. And then the big question is, after you've went through the whole processing thing, you put it into the canner, whatever method you're going to use. How do I know if I have a sealed jar and that sealed jar is ready to put on the shelf? When you start removing these jars, if you followed every step of the recipe, and we'll talk more in detail about this on April 16th for boiling water canning and then April 30th for the pressure canning, you'll actually hear those little jars pop or ping like. And that jar flat will have an inward curve to it. And there again, if you would tap the tops of your jars once they're out of the canner and cooled, you would find that it would have a ringing, tapping noise to it. And there again, if I picked it up by just the flat, had the ring off, that flat would be sealed on there tightly. And that's how you can check for a safe seal on your home canned foods. When we think about storing our home canned foods, Nebraska Extension recommends that you take that ring off of there. So in this picture, I would take that outer ring on there and just leave the flat on there. And then we would recommend that you store in a cool, dry, dark location or place. Avoid a location or a storage place that has temperature extremes. And the food that you are going to home can really, for best quality, should be used up in 1 year. So if I'm going to can carrots, how many carrots can my family eat in the next 12 months is what I should be gauging that on. And that's not for safety, but really you want to get them used up, because after 12 months in a cool, dark place, you're going to start losing quality, which means you're going to start losing some nutritional value as well. So only canning home foods for 1 year is recommended. So there again, the steps for when you home food preservation, you must follow the directions exactly. Only use replicable sources of canning recipes, prepare and process foods correctly, and make sure you're adjusting your processing time or the pressure that you're using in that pressure canner for the altitude where you are doing this process at. Okay, and this was some of the information. I mailed out an attachment with this posting for the URL today. And these are your research-based resources. So internet-wise, there's the link in the URL for the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And if you just type in National Center for Home Food Preservation, this uga.edu website will come up. And this is the USDA Complete Guide for Home Canning. It has great search engines. You'll find recipes for everything. And if you're curious, the University of Georgia Agriculture is who maintains this home food preservation website and updates it by updating it by research. That's if new research or changes, if anything changes to recipes, the University of Georgia Agriculture are maintaining that. The Nebraska Extension Food website is food.unl.edu. And I provided that link for you on that attachment as well. And we have a number of food preservation. There would be resources there that you could go back through the equipment pieces that I shared at the very beginning. And then know that Presto provides a lot of home canning resources and equipment. And gopresto.com is their website. And you can purchase their materials or their canners or whatever from there. But that's not to say that there's other research-based institutions and extension programs across the nation that have very good and safe research-based practices. Here's some I use many times being located in Western Nebraska, Colorado State. And if you're at high altitudes, they have some great resources there. Oregon State has a number of great resources as well. Just like extension.unl.edu is how you could find the Nebraska Extension website for all extension resource programming. The same thing for Colorado State, Oregon State, and Washington State. So know that those are there. I want to check my chat box here to see if we had any questions that came up. I don't see any. And so then the next slide I'm going to share with you is a QR code. So if you have your phone available and not doing it, this URL or this QR code, pan in on that. And this is a home food preservation evaluation, just so that I can show impact from this virtual series. And for each program that I'm doing, I'm asking that you go in on this website here or use this QR code to answer a quick survey to the value of this canning program, Basics of Home Food Preservation today. And then next slide is, this is what you should have gotten as an attachment when I sent out this link to you today. You should be able to download this and print it, and then you'll have those resources all there for you to use. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. Again, unmute if you have a question and don't worry about using the chat box. But this was really a pretty simple, pretty basic over what materials you need and the basics and the difference between hot and raw packing and the difference between boiling water canning and pressure canning. And there again, many of these resources came from the National Food Preservation website. So I just want to disclose that today. And we're done here within 30 minutes, but I do plan to re-email this out because I think we had several other people that were going to join us, and being the first of the series, if you signed up for another one, the next one is April 16th, and I will mail out that link, or email that link, I should say, out to you prior to that that time. And you can log in with that URL that I have for you to use at that time. Any other questions? Thank you very much. And there again, I'm coming from Nebraska, so this is all pertinent to anyone located outside of Nebraska. Check your elevation, go to the National Home Food Preservation website for any of those things, but a lot of my information will be specific for Nebraska. So very good. Happy canning. Get all your supplies ready. I know I was going through garden seeds this last weekend, making sure that I had the things that I wanted to plant in my garden, specifically thinking about what I was going to home can. Thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks.